Sound on the stream? Well, good morning, everyone. We're going to get our speakers working here so you guys can hear me here better. But we're in the last session before we could move on to a new Explore the Bible quarterly. And I believe the next one, if I'm not mistaken, I can't remember. Huh? Yeah, I was thinking it was a New Testament one, but Acts will be the next one. So it's gonna be a good one. Looking ahead, but in Genesis, we're gonna be in chapter 50. There's a question here that the author has. To think about. It says, why is it sometimes hard to accept forgiveness? Making plans and following schedules are a part of everyday life for most people. Some people are locked into their plans and become distressed when those plans don't work out as they expected. Others can just roll with the flow. The Bible reveals that God has plans and purposes for all things. Therefore, we need to trust his plans and purposes. Genesis 50, the passage we're about to read, indicates that Joseph finished life well because he trusted God's plan for him and his people. And picking up in Genesis chapter 50, verse 15, and when Joseph's brethren saw that their father was dead, they said, Joseph will peradventure hate us, and will certainly require us all the evil which we did unto him. Peradventure. I don't think I've ever seen that word. Let's see what it says in. Joseph will peradventure hate us. It says if Joseph in the Christian Standard, it says if Joseph is holding a grudge against us, he will certainly repay us for all the suffering we caused him. So I'm assuming holding a grudge is what that means. Peradventure hate us. Prior to, maybe. I'll have to look that one up. And they sent a messenger unto Joseph, saying, Thy father did command before he died, saying, So shall ye say unto Joseph, Forgive, I pray thee now, the trespass of thy brethren and their sin, for they did unto thee evil. And now we pay thee, forgive the trespass of the servants of the God of thy father. And Joseph wept when they spake unto him, and his brother also went and fell down before his face, and they said, Behold, we are thy servants. After Jacob's death, Joseph's brothers expressed to one another their worry that Joseph had been holding a grudge against them, waiting for their father's death before exacting his revenge. They apparently thought Joseph was going to do to them what their uncle Esau had planned to do to their father once Isaac was deceased. And again, we can see that referencing back earlier in Genesis. Nowhere in the text did the brothers ask for or receive an explicit statement of forgiveness from Joseph. In fact, this is the first time Moses recorded the brothers' admission of guilt for what they did to Joseph. During their journey, sojourn in Egypt, the brothers had time to learn about the suffering of Joseph endured as a slave in Potiphar's house because of them. Surely they learned how Potiphar's wife had falsely accused him. They must have discovered that Joseph then spent the next 13 years of his life in Pharaoh's dungeon. Given the deep love Joseph expressed for Jacob and his younger brother Benjamin when he was reunited with them, they witnessed how deeply they had wounded Joseph by separating him from those whom he loved. So, again, what the Bible study author is trying to relay here is that they couldn't get over the fact of what they did to their brother, right? And even more so when 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 their dad had died, uh, they were fully expecting that Joseph was going to lash out at them then. Like he had been holding up this anger and this resentment, maybe regret, whatever other feelings we as humans tend to hold on to when we've been wronged, right? And in their human thinking, they said, okay, father's dead. Now we can expect what is to actually happen. Um, in fact, what the Bible study author is saying here, nowhere else in Genesis does it say that Joseph forgave them. Now we read last week, right, where he was able to extend love, but he didn't explicitly say, I forgive you of these things, and that's what they're basing their whole um, actions on, right? Because they weren't explicitly told that they were forgiven, even though they seen good intent, good actions, genuine love from their brother, right? They weren't explicitly said, hey, this is, we don't have to worry about this anymore. Um, in fact, if we remember, he accused them. He was truthful with them and honest and said, "This is what you guys did to me, but now what I'm going to do for you guys is take care of you because we are experiencing this famine. God has been working through all of this. In fact, he put me in that hole. And because he put me in that hole, I'm able to be here taking care of you guys." And so, again, the explicit statement, "I forgive you," wasn't in there. Principle to them that Joseph could forgive them of these offenses and not repay them for their wrongs. Joseph was certainly in the position to exact revenge. He had demonstrated this when they first came to Egypt seeking food. No doubt, as Joseph's brothers resided in Goshen, they had opportunities to witness the authority Joseph wielded in Egypt. Joseph had the power to do whatever he wanted with them. And then we come to that question: why is it sometimes hard to accept forgiveness? And if we think about it with our human brain, right? If we think about it with all of our human emotion, we probably have a hard time accepting forgiveness because we're not easy. We're not too keen on forgiving others, right? When something's been done wrong to us, it's hard to really get over that part, right? And even these brothers, when they felt so wrong when Joseph was sharing his dreams and his ambitions and everything that was going on with him, and even the resentment that his family was showing to himself, right? They took it as a wrong. They took it as a bad thing, okay? Now, they didn't say, "Joseph, because you told us these dreams and we got mad at you, we made a mistake, and for whatever reason you were telling us those dreams," or anything like that. "For whatever wrongs you've committed, we forgive you." Instead, they took action, and they acted out of their human emotions, and they said, "You know what? We're going to take care of this ourselves." Just like what we usually do. "You know what? I've been wronged. I'm going to take care of it myself. I'm going to go and do this thing, or I'm going to get revenge. I'm going to get back at them," right? Somebody says something bad about us. Well, a lot of us natives like to joke, right? And when we get teased, when we get made fun of or whatever, we try to come back. We try to come back with something equal or maybe a little bit worse, right? You get into a little word spout. Well, somebody's feelings might get hurt because of that. We're well aware of that. So you have to kind of tease with the intention of playing, right? Or not causing too much harm. But that may get out of hand. That may get out of control, right? Oh yeah, and that's a good thing. That's what Joseph he exhibited, right? He knew that when he had his encounter with his brothers, he knew that was his family, but he still made him go through all the hoops. He made him jump through all kinds of little tests and everything like that. He might have already come to the fact that he was going to love them and help them out and everything like that, but he acted different. And even afterwards, he wasn't totally the same, right? He knew where he was. He knew what he was supposed to do, and he might have even knew that this was going to come about. This part right here. So, but on the other side, why was it so hard for his brothers to accept that they were forgiven? Because they didn't believe, and that's the part that the Bible study author really wants to expound upon, wants to study today. When we've come to that point that God is reaching out to us and He's given us His gospel, He's given us His word, He's shown us that He's true, that He sent Jesus to die for everyone, for their sin. Unless you believe that, you haven't been saved. And that's the hard part right there. You have to overcome the human emotions. You have to overcome what the world is telling you, right? The world wants you to get even. The world wants you to make that wrong or right. And there's no way to do that. There's zero benefit usually about getting even. But God has given us a good message and saying that it doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't have to be that way because I've already paid for that. I've already sent my son to die for somebody who's lived that perfect life to be able to atone for all of those sins in the world. And that's the part where the Bible study author says, why is it sometimes hard to accept forgiveness? Well, because we're not ready to forgive, right? And if we're not ready to forgive, if we're not willing to forgive those things, right? And it could be as small as stealing a piece of gum from a convenience store. It could be walking out, or it could be driving off. It could be driving off from the pump, right? Stealing, gas or goods or whatever. Or maybe telling what we call like little white lie, those types of things, or a big lie, or even a bigger lie. Start going on to a big old story. I heard somebody say something about a fish story. You guys you ever caught a fish, and that fish, as time goes on, that fish grows, right? It's not a half-pound perch that you caught in a little bitty pond. You're on the 7 seas and you're getting a great white, right? It grows, and that's the problem with sin. It starts out small, but then it grows and it grows and it grows until it consumes you, because what you've done, you can't see yourself forgiving. So why would anybody else forgive you? And that's why it's hard, because you're putting yourself in them other person's shoes and saying, well, I wouldn't forgive myself. And that's why it's hard. So the brothers sent Joseph a message through an intermediary. The message they relayed to Joseph indicates it came from thy father instead of from our father. This emphasizes Joseph's obligation as a son to obey the command of his father. Given Joseph's love for and loyalty to Jacob, they apparently thought communicating the message this way would carry more weight with Joseph. Also, the brothers made it sound as if this was one of Jacob's last requests before he died, communicating just how important this was to Jacob, and therefore how important it should be to Joseph. They're playing again to his human, and even comes out with the way they're acting. They're still talking about the human side. This the Bible study author sums it up real quick, or sums it up nicely in saying, this was one of the last requests that Jacob had before he passed on. And we see that, right? Uh, in stories and books or whatever, and when somebody's on their deathbed, right, their last request was this, their last words were this. And we can even relate to that with people that we know, their last words, concerning whatever subject or whatever thing, right? This is what they wanted, and it seems more important when you frame it that way. But those are just human things. Those are just human things. One of the things that you could say about that is, well, when my brother passed away, there was a note that was left, and said something about it was a note to my parents, and it said something about the movies. Thank you for taking me to the movies, or something like that. You could get that, a sense that, well, they really like the movies. I don't know that my brother and I really enjoyed the movies growing up. Now we like going and watching and getting the popcorn and all that type of stuff. But I think I enjoy movies now more as an adult, because I, have intelligence about plots and all that. So when there's a really good movie, right, we get to enjoy it. But as a kid, we just like special effects and all that type of stuff. I'm not sure that you could get that out of that, even though those were the last words, right? And you could say, well, we could have a movie night and all of this. You could expound it. You could extract a whole lot of human meaning out of those being the last words. When reality, it was just talk, because they was in a hard place at a hard time, and it wasn't. They were trying to make sense of their own thing, and we can't extract anything out of that. And that's what Joseph's brothers are trying to do here. They're trying to make it seem more important, even though those were just human activities. There's no indication Jacob actually gave this command to his sons. It is possible that while Jacob was on his deathbed, the brothers expressed their concerns to him regarding Joseph's potential revenge. It is certainly possible that Jacob told them to communicate this command to Joseph. It is just as feasible that they made the whole thing up because they were terrified of what Joseph might do to them. The Bible study author also goes into a part where stressful times, humans can make up a lot when there's a lot of stress. In fact, we can actually forget a lot of this stuff. That's what's going on. Last night, the storms that were going around and everything, one could forget that there was a storm. There was what do you call it? Severe storms and tornadoes predicted pretty much the whole state of Oklahoma. What wasn't apparent was there was actually severe potential down south of Oklahoma in the Texas border. North Texas, they got a huge tornado. I don't know if you guys know, they got a huge tornado. It was on the ground for a long time, but there was no warning. There was no indication that there was going to be something that significant that far south. In fact, it was all supposed to be north here in North Oklahoma and most Kansas, like eastern part of Kansas. Kansas got hit too, and we know what happened over in Claremore. But in times of stress, when people are worried about all these things, they might forget that, hey, we were told about this. We were told about there was stuff going on when the storms initially started up, right? They kind of died out and everybody kind of forgot. Like, hey, what's going on? Well, we're going to go to church, start making plans and everything. And then all of a sudden, what's that warning? What are phones going off for? What's happening? Oh, wait, we were told this was supposed to start, right around evening time and continue throughout the night and be a big event, And in that stress, in our own thinking of things, well, hey, where's the storm at? What's going on? And then We start filling in the gaps with our own imagination. Well, there's probably a line of storms and all that. There was only 3 storms last night around 10 o'clock. One in Kansas, one in Claremore and Pryor, or northeastern Oklahoma, and then one in Texas. There was hardly any other weather around. But, there was all kinds of reports of things going on. So the brothers' message contained 2 parts. The first and most important was Jacob's command to Joseph. It called for Joseph's obedience to his father and provided Joseph a reason to listen to the second part of the message. The second part contains the brothers' own plea for Joseph to forgive them for their trespass against him. The vocabulary of both parts of the message highlights the sin and suffering they had perpetuated against Joseph, exposing the egregious nature of their deeds and describing them in a comprehensive way. The brothers fully confess their mistreatment of Joseph, begging for his forgiveness. They referred to themselves as the servants of the God of thy father, hoping Joseph would recognize they were a part of God's divine plan for Jacob and his offspring who would become the nation of Israel. This statement also recalls the blessings Jacob bestowed upon his sons just before he died. The men hoped to appeal not only to Joseph's loyalty to Jacob, but also his loyalty to God. Hearing their message, Joseph wept. He realized that his relationship with his brothers had not healed and restored as it needed to be. Joseph had been good to them and had promised to take care of them. Nevertheless, their guilt made it hard for them to embrace his forgiveness and provision. Only after Joseph had received their message did the brothers face him in person. When they came to him, they fell down before his face and offered themselves to be his servants. This recalls Joseph's dreams as a boy and the men's first encounter with him, and the time when they were brought back to Egypt by Joseph's steward. Many years back, Joseph's brothers had done everything they could to make sure Joseph's prophetic dreams could not become a reality. Now they were bowing at his feet. It demonstrates that God's plans and purposes will be fulfilled in the lives of his followers. No one can thwart them. No one can not allow them to continue or to actually be fulfilled, right? We might say no one can affect God's plans. Now, we can affect who's in them. We can choose to be a part of them, or we can choose to watch them, right? But they will be fulfilled. That's a really, really good reminder of what's about to come. When he says that he's going to send someone to be able to, that the prophecy that there's going to be a single soul that's going to live a perfect life and be able to die and rise again. All of that's going to come true. People are going to try to stop it, and we see that throughout Jesus's life, right? People didn't agree with what he was preaching. People didn't agree with what he was teaching. People didn't even agree with the miracles that he was performing. And in their own minds, they wanted to stop it. They wanted to not see it unfold, even though they were told about it, even though they could read it for themselves right there in the scriptures, that this is what is going to happen for this to occur. They rejected it. The Joseph's brothers, they were given a glimpse. They were given a prophecy. And instead of helping, right? Instead of being a part of the plan or intentionally being a part of the plan, they actually rejected it. And because of that, they can see it being fulfilled before their eyes, and they took the wrong road. What impact does guilt have on our ability to relate to others? What impact does guilt have on our ability to relate to others? Yep. Yep. And that's a really, really good point right there because um, I always go back to that question is when people are dealing with it, we're not able to judge and evaluate if somebody is truly saved. Okay, and and it's really hard for somebody to understand, but that is a relationship. That well, if it's a relationship, that's a situation that you have with the Holy Spirit, that you have with Jesus and God, right? You have to make that commitment. You have to that's your obligation or your what he terms it or what we term it or what do you call it? Define it is choice. That's your choice of whether or not to accept what he's given us, the word, the gospel. Right. And what some people tend to think is and they lay judgment out is, well, you've come to this point and you've accepted him, but then you don't live right. And even ourselves, we don't fully comprehend what he's trying to teach us, and we don't fully grasp the concept of living a different life. And so we continue to fall. We continue to do some of those things, and we begin to doubt. And that's why it goes back to what he was asking, what the Bible study author was asking earlier. So why is it sometimes hard to accept forgiveness? Well, because we keep on doing the same thing that we're doing, or on the other side, on the flip side, we keep on seeing the same activities perpetuate. Nobody's changing. Nobody's doing anything. Exactly, and that's where we have to. This is a really, really good illustration of it. Is Joseph's brothers? They accepted the good things. They accepted all of this provision that they were saved. They were actually they were going to be destroyed by the famine. Them and their people, their city, and all of it would have been gone. They would have died had they not come to that city that Joseph that he was in charge of, that he had planned for this, right? He had planned for this because they weren't over that fact, even though they experienced God's blessings. They weren't truly believers of that forgiveness, and that's what Joseph is battling right now. But that's the same type of relationship that God wants with us. Is He's already extended the provision. In fact, like Joseph, He's already planned to take care of us. Even though we're in this world where it's not gonna, we might experience some nice material things. We might experience some nice, we might call them even blessings, but we might be able to rise up in a industry or in a community, right? Rise up as a leader or as a business person, or even in we might be a teacher or educator or whatever. You might rise to the top. You might be taken care of very, very well. But unless you understand that God has sent His Son to die for you and pay for your sin debt, you're not truly saved. But only you can come to that point. Only you can actually work that out, work that situation out with God to actually believe what He's told us. Again, going back to the scriptures, going back to even this story, right? Joseph, when he was dealing with his brothers the first time, when they came to this, he explained, God's working in all this. Yeah, I went through all these things and you took part in that. And you sent me there. But it was God's plan. It was God's plan through all this. And they're just using words because they're scared of what he might do to them, because they haven't gotten over the fact that they did bad things to their brother. And because they haven't gotten over that fact, they think that all this is just fun and games until it comes to that point when they're dealing with their own life. And because they're at their wits' end, they're at the end of what they're talking about, they're using their father, and they're using what Joseph had said to explain to them. But it's not an internal belief. It's not an internal belief that Joseph has forgiven them. And the same way, we could use our parents' faith. We can use our brothers and our sisters and maybe even our pastor's faith. We can say, because they believed and because I'm following them or learning from them and I'm being educated by them, being mentored by them or whatever, because they believed, I should be taken care of. No, it doesn't work that way. It's only because you believe and you've come to that realization that you need God, that you need Jesus to stand in your spot, because he's the one that lived that perfect life. He's the only one that could fulfill that sacrifice to pay for that sin debt for you to enter heaven, for you to claim what God has set aside for you. That's the only reason that you're able to be there. It can't be because of other people. It can't be because you learned about it, or no, it's because you have that direct relationship with him. And because if we still are taking on that guilt, if we're still believing that we impact that in some way, shape, or form, whether like what Grandma was saying, whether it was in the past, whether it's now, or whether it's in the future, if we have that guilt on us that we're somehow affecting that, then we really haven't been restored. And that's what Joseph is coming to that realization here with his brothers. He's done all this, but they haven't been, their relationship is still strained. Their brothers still believe that they've done some wrong, and because they've done some wrong, Joseph is going to lash out to them and make it right. And that guilt, that severs that relationship. The same way it severs your guys' relationship with the Lord Jesus Christ. If you think that you have some impact on that because you've sinned or you haven't overcome that guilt, that's going to stand in that way of Jesus standing in that spot. Because then you're putting yourself in there saying, well, I did this. And again, it doesn't matter if it was last year. It doesn't matter if this year. And it especially doesn't matter if it's next year. As long as Jesus Christ is in that spot, you've put him in that spot, you believe in him, that he's paid for that, that can restore you. And that's what Joseph is really dealing with right now. He thought this was already taken care of. And Joseph said unto them, fear not, for am I in the place of God? But as for you, ye thought evil against me, but God meant it unto good to bring to pass, and it is this day to save much people alive. Now therefore fear ye not. I will nourish you and your little ones. And he comforted them and spake kindly unto them. Again, the King James is good because there's a lot of old language and stuff that you can get out of it. I always like the older languages. Our native languages are the same way. One word didn't mean like a specific activity. Like tea refers to a beverage, and we know what we can do with it. But if you're going to tea, doesn't mean you're drinking tea, right? Back in the day, they meant that was just socializing and going out and grabbing maybe some tea or breakfast or whatever. There was a whole lot of meaning behind it. In our native words, our phrases are the same way. That's what the King James is like, and I like it. But again, when we're trying to study and all that, it's a little bit hard to understand. But the Holman Christian and the Christian Standard, it breaks it down a little bit easier. It says, but Joseph said unto them, don't be afraid. Am I in the place of God? You planned evil against me. God planned it for good to bring about the present result, the survival of many people. Therefore, don't be afraid. I will take care of you and your little ones. And he comforted them and spoke kindly to them. Again, the Christian the CSB and the older version of the Holman Christian Standard Bible, it helps clarify some of the English that we use today with the English that they used back in the day. So you kind of seen that. It says, "Fear not" was the message they needed to hear, because God was faithful, because God is faithful to his promises and purposes for his people. They need not be afraid. God had communicated this truth to Abram, Isaac, and Jacob. Now the heads of the tribes of Israel needed to learn this truth as well. And Joseph then asked a rhetorical question that communicated God is in control, no one else. When he asked him, he said, "For am I in the place of God?" And that doesn't need to be explained. That doesn't need to be, what he's simply saying is, it's not my place to judge you. And in the same way, we could take a little bit of lesson from that in today's world is, we're not made judges. We're not in that authority. We're servants. And when we serve one another, we help and support and edify, like the scripture, like Ephesians says, edify one another. And then it also says rebuke. I think that's the phrase that the word that it uses the most. It says rebuke. It doesn't say judge. It doesn't say, hey, because you're doing this wrong, you're going to be punished or anything like that. It says rebuke. What does that mean? Well, when you see something evil, do something about it. Don't accept it. When we're conversing with our brothers and sisters in Christ, and even those on the outside of that, lost people, right? We don't have to accept the evil things. We can rebuke them. That doesn't mean we're not going to love them. Those activities we shouldn't stand for, right? Those things that they want to carry on, and we could say all kinds of things about those. We're not evaluating or judging. We've been taught to not accept those things. And in not accepting that, we're standing on that principle, we're upholding the standards of God, because that's what we've been taught. It doesn't mean we don't love them. It doesn't mean we don't care for them and make provisions for them. In fact, that's exactly how Joseph was handling his brothers. He didn't like the fact that they thought that he was going to, they were going to try to get rid of him. They were carrying out an intention of evil, right? But God used it for good. He didn't stand for it. He didn't say that it was all right for his brothers to do any of that. He still didn't accept it. He said this plan was put into place, and because God had given them a prophecy, he was going to carry that prophecy. He was going to complete that. He was going to fulfill that. There might have been some bad things about it. It wasn't accepted. Joseph certainly couldn't protect himself against it, but it all worked out for the good of his people, and that's what he was saying. He says, "You thought evil against me, but God meant it unto good, to bring it to pass." And it was to save everyone that's alive today, because not only would Egypt have ruined because of the 7 years of famine, if they didn't store enough up to take care of them and carry them through them 7 bad years, they would have been perished, but also because they were able to save themselves or take care of themselves. They were also able to take care of all the countryside around them. And in that part, that's where Joseph's family comes back in. Joseph did not deny their evil intentions. However, he understood God had used their sinful actions to bring about a great deliverance for many people, including them. Similarly, we can see how God used the wicked actions of sinful men to bring about the greater and more expansive salvation of believers through the person and work of Jesus. Many Bible teachers see similarities between the life of Joseph and Jesus. Both were rejected, betrayed, endured suffering for the good of others, and offered forgiveness to those who did not deserve forgiveness. And that's a really big part of that. And I'm glad he phrased it like that. A lot of people, when we're thinking about sin and our guilt and all that, we think we don't deserve, right? We get into that part where, well, when we're trying to reward people, right? Well, they deserve it. That's how I don't like the participation trophies and medals that they give out nowadays for kids and all that. It has good intentions. It really does. The thought of it, of rewarding everybody with something because it builds their self-esteem. It gives them confidence. It helps. But there are winners and losers in life. There are people who are meant for great things, and there are people who are meant for different things, because that's the way God made us. He made us all different and unique. So we are not all going to be strengthened in the same capacities for these competitions or whatever. And when we talk about somebody deserving something, that's how that participation stuff got in there. Well, they all deserve a good foundation or anything. Well, no, the good foundation would be, well, you need to get bigger. You get better. You need to upskill. You need to do that. And then it's the same way in the work world. Not everybody deserves the same wage. Not everybody has the same skills, all the same experience and all that. So not everybody's going to be treated the same. But that's a godlike provision. Not everybody was treated the same with Joseph's brothers. They were all assigned different ones to be able to accomplish the whole goal of the work of God. But that's where our human selves get in the way, is that word deserve. Well, we deserve. No. And in the same, on the flip side, on the opposite, we don't deserve forgiveness. We don't deserve any. No, you don't. But God did it anyway because he loves us. He created us to be in that relationship with him, to be able to be almost equal. He made us in his image. Well, a lot of people are going to be they're going to be astonished when they get up there and they see, I hope he's at least 6 foot, but he might be 5'2". God, they're going to be like, what in the world? So, well, I created you in my image. I didn't know that you were going to be 5'2", whatever the height was, the normal height back in the day, or maybe he's a little bit taller. Maybe he's like Shaq. But people are gonna get up there and be afraid, be astonished, and be like, what in the world? He did that because he wants a relationship with us, because he thinks of us as his people. Joseph's response to his brothers in verses 19 and 20 summarizes the entire message of the Joseph narrative. Do not be afraid, but trust in God, because he is faithful to accomplish his plans and purposes in the lives of his covenant people. Joseph realized only the hand of God could have accomplished what he witnessed in his life. Proverbs 19:21 speaks to it well. There are many devices in a man's heart. Nevertheless, the counsel of the Lord that shall stand. It says in more plain English, there's a lot of things that the humans want, but we might even be working towards them. We might even be trying to get education and skills to accomplish those things, but only God can allow it to happen. And that's what Proverbs 19:21 is talking about. Because of his confidence in God, Joseph was able to point to his brothers to him, and not him as in Joseph, but him as in the Lord. In verse 21, Joseph again repeated to his brothers not to be afraid. Then he reassured them that he would continue to take care of them and their families. He comforted them and spake kindly unto them, which in Hebrew is literally, he spoke to their hearts. Joseph assured them that the death of their father changed nothing concerning his loving kindness toward him. And then it goes on to reaffirm what God had shared with them through his father, but also the ones that went before him. So then Joseph dwelt in Egypt, he and his father's house, and Joseph lived in 110 years. And Joseph saw Ephraim's children of the third generation, the children also of Mashur, the son of Manasseh, were brought upon Joseph's knees. And Joseph said unto his brethren, I die, and God will surely visit you and bring you out of this land unto the land which he sware to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. And Joseph took an oath of the children of Israel, saying, God will surely visit you, and ye shall carry up my bones from hence. So Joseph died, being 110 years old, and they embalmed him, and he was put in a coffin in Egypt. Again, blessing them and telling them that God wasn't done with them. God actually had more in store for them, and we're going to see that. We're going to see that carried out in Moses, right? After everything was accomplished there, they were promised they were going to be restored and put back in the land that God had actually given them. And that's why I was kind of conflicted when I seen I was like, we're going to the New Testament, but if you want to carry on your study, the next part of that is really, really important. In fact, it's probably more important thinking about it now, and the way everything lines up with the way Jesus was promised to us. Again, that prophecy, what he was talking about, God was going to take care of them, was going to take them out of Egypt, right? And it only goes to show you that God is faithful and truthful in what he tells us. And he carries out his promises. He fulfills his promises. He's the only one in the world that actually means 100% what he says, and actually does 100%, probably 110%. He does more than what he says when he's carrying out his promises. So really, really good way to end, and I'm looking forward to what our next one, where it picks up. So is there any questions, comments before we get started? Yep. It's good. Yeah. It's that obligation. If we feel that commitment, then and if you study, that's why it's so important to be in your Bible. And a lot of new believers, they go and read, and they maybe try to understand on their own, but you have to be here to experience that change. And I'm not just talking about church. You have to be in a relationship with God. And exactly that you're going to read, you're going to understand, but only are you able to really live that out if you have the Holy Spirit, if you have that God, and you're making that commitment to change, to live a changed life, not because you're told to, much like a kid, rearing them up, right? We could tell them no 1,000 times, and then they see a bunch of people jumping off a bridge, and they're like, "Oh, that looks like fun." Only if they actually believe that they're actually going to get hurt will they stay away. On the flip side, they see a lot of people prospering. They see a lot of people going around, and they're like, well, that's not for me. Only if they actually believe that God has made a way for them, and they can carry that out. Having faith in Lord Jesus Christ, will they actually accomplish that? So good. Mm-hmm. Yep. Tells us. Any other questions, comments? We're running over time, so let's go ahead and end with a word of prayer. Ken, would you dismiss us from Sunday school?